Hi, I'm Catherine and I'm going to be your teacher for today. Here at Prime Pass, we've put together some really easy and simple tutorials for you to create a masterpiece in the comfort of your own home. So get comfortable, put on some music, get a drink, and let's talk through the materials. In your pack, you will have 12 tubes of acrylic paint. You will have 2 paintbrushes. You'll have a medium-sized brush and a smaller brush. You will have your paint palette for you to squirt your paint onto and do your mixing. You'll have your 8" by 9" canvas board. You will also need kitchen towel, a cup of water and a kitchen sponge. In this tutorial, we're going to be painting Dock in the Sunset. So we'll be bringing in lots of lovely sunset colours of pinks and blues in the sky and reflected in the water. We're also going to draw in a lovely cherry blossom tree with falling petals. So let's get started with this peaceful and dreamy painting. Once you have all your materials set up in front of you, we can start preparing our paint palette. For Dock in the Sunset, we're going to be using primary blue, yellow, magenta, black and white. So we'll start off by squeezing a good squirt of paint into our palette. You don't have to go sparingly. Put quite a lot on there, so be nice and generous. And space out your paint as well. You don't have to bunch it up all in the same area of the palette. So we'll be using a few more colours that we don't have in our tube, so we'll need to mix those up ourselves. So we're going to take our large brush and we're going to dip it into our water to get it nice and wet. And then I'm just going to take a tissue, just dry it slightly on my tissue. And I'm going to start off by mixing a brown. So I'm going to take some yellow and I'm going to pop it in the dish next to it. So get quite a lot of yellow because we need quite a bit of brown. And then I'm going to take some black as well and add that to the mix. And then I'm also going to take some magenta as well. And I'm going to mix that all up together. We want quite a dark brown, so I'm going to use just slightly more black. But you can really take your time with your mixing until you're happy with the right tone. So once you're happy with your brown, I'm just going to wash off my brush in the water. And next I'm going to mix a light pink. So I'm going to take a scoop of magenta and I'm going to pop that into the dish next to it. You can get off some of the excess paint by just kind of using the sides of the dish just to take off that paint. And then I'm going to dip into the white. So I'm going to get quite a big scoop of white. And then I'm going to add that to the mix as well. So we're going to need quite a lot of pink, so make sure you're mixing enough for the whole painting. So keep dipping into the white and keep mixing until you're happy with your tone of pink. So the next colour we're going to mix is a light blue. So I'm just going to wash my brush off in the water. So same again, I'm going to take some blue and I'm going to pop that in the dish next to it. Again, we'll need quite a lot, so really dunk your brush. And then I'm going to dip into the white and then add that to the blue and mix. So when you're happy with all the colours that you've mixed, you can wash your brush in the water. And dry it in your tissue. And now we're ready to start painting. Before we start painting, I'm going to just change my water and get a fresh cup of water so our colours don't go murky. And then I'm just going to put my palette to the side and bring in my canvas. I'm going to start off by taking my pencil and I'm going to divide up the canvas into the sky and the lake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw 2 points about halfway up the canvas. These don't have to be really precise, just find the halfway mark. And then I'm going to draw a slightly curved line from one point to the other. And this is going to be where the base of our mountains are going to be. So they'll be slightly curved on both sides. But don't worry too much about these pencil marks, because we won't see them at the end when we have all our paint on. We're just getting in a nice curved line. When you're happy with your line, you can put your pencil to the side, and then we're going to take our kitchen sponge and we're going to dip it into our water to get it a little bit damp. And I'm just going to squeeze off the excess water so it's not too wet, we just want it a little bit damp so the paint will kind of cling to the sponge. And then with one side I'm going to dip into the light blue and get a good generous amount of paint on your sponge. And then I'm going to use kind of horizontal strokes from left to right, and I'm going to start at the very top and we're going to start to fill in the colour for the sky. And then with the other side of the sponge, I'm going to dip into the light pink. And with the pink, I'm going to add that underneath the blue. And I'm actually going to go over the line that I just drew. And I'm going to bring that slowly up into the sky. So left to right, and we're creating the impression that it's a nice sunset. So when you're happy with the sky, we're going to do the sea at the bottom. So with a clean area of our sponge, I'm going to dip into pure blue. And I'm going to start at the bottom of my canvas. And same again, I'm going to go from left to right. And we're filling in the kind of dark area at the bottom first. And then we'll gradually bring in lighter colours towards the top. So I'm going to dip into the pink. And I'm going to add the pink, but then I'm also going to add white over the top as well. So I'm just going to add my pink first. And I'm going to fill up all that space. And then I'm going to dip into the white. So find a clean area on your sponge and dip into the white. And then I'm going to add that on top of the pink that I've just applied. So you can really layer up the colours. It's all about blending on the canvas and creating really lovely tones. So some of the colours that you already have on your sponge might start coming through, but that's actually really nice. And I'm just going to move downwards slightly, and slowly the colour will start to kind of fade out and blend out into the dark blue. Okay, so when you're happy with your colours, we're going to wait for that to dry, and then we can move on to the next bit. So once your canvas is dry, I'm going to take my pencil again, and I'm going to draw in the dock at the bottom. So I'm going to go about an inch from the left-hand side of the canvas, and I'm just going to draw a little mark with my pencil. And I'm going to do this on the other side as well, so about an inch inwards. And this is where the edge of the dock will be. And then I'm going to gradually draw a line from my first point that I just drew. And I'm going to draw this diagonally upwards. And I'm going to stop when I'm about a quarter of the way up the canvas. So find your quarter mark. And we're going to stop about there. And we're going to do the same on the other side as well. So our second point, now these lines don't have to be too perfect, we'll be painting over the top, but these are kind of just guidelines for you, so you know where the edges of the dock will be. So once you've drawn two horizontal lines going upwards, we'll just meet those two lines together by drawing a horizontal line with your pencil. And that's the top of the dock. I've also got some pillars on each side. So for the pillars, we're going to draw straight lines a few centimetres high. And these are like kind of thin rectangles. And then I'm going to draw in my second pillar for both sides as well. These are going to be shorter. Do that on the other side as well. So you can kind of change the shape of these when you're adding your paint, but for the moment we're kind of just getting in those kind of guidelines so you know where things are going to be. And then I have two more pillars at the top, and these are going to be much shorter. Okay, so there we have our dock drawn out. So I'm going to lower my horizon a little bit because I got this really lovely line coming across, kind of a natural line. So I'm going to lower the horizon. So I'm going to do the same again, where I'm going to draw a curved line across the canvas. Okay, so we have our horizon line drawn in. Now I'm going to draw the mountains. So the mountains are going to be kind of a couple of inches above that line that we just drew. And these are going to be kind of curvy mountains. So instead of like a nice straight curved line that we just drew earlier, these are kind of going to be up and down, wobbly line. And you can choose the shape of your mountains. You know, you can have some really high ones and some shorter ones. Kind of make it look nice and natural. And we're going to kind of draw in a really nice, interesting shape for our mountains. Okay, so when you're happy with your mountains, we're going to draw in the sun. So I'm going to find a kind of a round shape that's going to help me draw in a nice kind of round sun. I'm using a bottle top, or you might have something else that will help you. But we're going to find the kind of center point of our canvas. And then we're going to give the impression that the sun is kind of rising above or setting behind the mountain. So it's going to be kind of, some of it will be hidden. So we're going to just use this bottle top as a sort of reference. So I'm just kind of widening the sun by using that kind of bottle top reference. And I'm just making it slightly bigger. Again, don't worry about these pencil lines too much. When we have the paint on, you won't be able to see them. Okay, and there we have our sun. So now I'm going to draw in the trees. So from the left-hand side, about an inch down, I'm going to draw in my first branch. So these are just going to be kind of thin pencil lines, and then we'll go much thicker with the paint. And remember to draw little branches coming off of your main branch to make it look nice and natural. I also have a couple of branches on the other side as well. So there we have our trees. So next I'm going to paint in my sun, but before we start painting we need to mix a kind of a light lemon yellow. So I'm going to take my large brush and I'm going to take a scoop of yellow and I'm just going to put that in the middle of my palette. And then I'm going to take a scoop of white, So quite a lot, because you want quite a light yellow. And I'm going to give that a good mix. And I'm going to take just a little bit more white and add that to the mix as well. Okay, so when you're happy with that lemon yellow, I'm just going to take off a little bit of excess off of the brush, and I'm just going to use the side of the palette so we don't have too much paint on the brush. And then I'm going to paint in our sun. So you can like really take your time with this, just to make sure you're getting that kind of perfect round shape for your sun. Okay, so when you're happy with your sun, we're going to start to kind of paint in the reflections in the water with the blue. So I'm going to wash my brush in my water. And then I'm just going to grab a tissue and dry my brush in my tissue. And then I'm going to switch to a smaller brush, and I'm just going to dip that in the water as well, just to get that nice and damp. And then I'm going to take some light blue, and I'm just going to pop a patch onto my palette, because I'm going to add just a touch of the darker blue as well, just to darken up that blue slightly. So when you're happy with that blue, I'm just going to take off some of the excess paint on the edge of the palette, because we don't want our brush kind of too laden with paint. So I'm just going to take off a bit of paint, and then I'm going to start at the bottom of the sea, and I'm going to use kind of quite loose, like streaky strokes, horizontal. And these can be quite kind of random and quite free. So kind of have your hand almost kind of just raised above your canvas, because you want kind of like a loose wrist as you're doing this. And feel free to kind of paint over that dock that you just drew. We can still see the lines underneath, so it's okay. So you can have some which are kind of like more defined strokes, some are kind of more thinner, delicate strokes. Have a variation. So the further up I go, as I'm reaching kind of my line, I'm going to just take a little bit of paint, and I'm going to aim to create kind of quite thin lines. So take it quite slowly, and don't lean too hard with your brush. Okay, so we'll leave that to dry and then we'll add the reflection of the sun. So once your blue streaks have dried, we can start adding in the yellow reflection. So I'm just going to wash my brush in my water to take off some of that blue. It's really important that we wait for the blue to dry, so when we're adding the yellow, we're not just mixing it into green. So once your brush is clean, I'm just going to dry it on my tissue. And then I'm just going to take some yellow. I'm going to add a tiny bit more white, just to lighten it up even more. And again, I'm just going to use the edge of the palette just to take off some of that excess paint off of my brush. And then on our horizon line is where I'm going to start with the yellow. So I'm going to do those same kind of nice delicate strokes again. And I'm going to go from left to right, left to right. So I'm just going to add even more paint to that. So feel free to kind of mix with your lighter yellow and your slightly darker yellow as well to create some really lovely tones. And I'm just going to do that over the top. So don't go too hard with your brush, be kind of quite light. We want to get kind of really nice delicate strokes. And I'm going to bring that right down to the dock. And I'm just going to go over the dock slightly. Okay, so when you're happy with your reflection in the water, we'll wait for that to dry and then we'll carry on painting. So when your reflection in the water has dried, we're going to start to paint in the mountains. So I'm going to wash my brush in my water. And I'm just going to dry it on a tissue. And then I'm going to switch to my larger brush. And I'm going to dip into my brown. So evenly coat your brush in your brown. And then we're going to fill in the mountains with our brown. So you can do this really slowly and you can be really precise and kind of redefine your mountain shape with your brush. So next I'm going to fill in my tree branches and I'm going to use a smaller brush, so I'm just going to wash off my large brush in the water. And then I'm going to dry that in my tissue. So before I start painting in my branches, I'm going to wait for the mountains to dry so my hand doesn't smudge any of the paint. So now that the mountains are dry, I can start painting in my branches. So I'm going to dip into the brown paint. And I'm not taking too much paint, so I'm not kind of drowning my brush, I'm just getting some paint on the tip. And then slowly, slowly, take your time with this. We're going to paint over our pencil line. And we're going to fill in the branches. So you can choose how thick you want your branches to be. It's completely up to you. Or if you want kind of thinner, delicate lines. So if you add slightly more pressure onto your brush, you can create kind of thicker lines. Or if you go quite delicately and you add a little bit of pressure, then you can create thinner lines. You can even dip your brush into your water just a little bit, just to make sure your paint kind of spreads nice and evenly. So do add a little bit of water to your brush. So when you're happy with your branches, we're going to let that dry, but we can move on to our dock while we're waiting for the branches to dry before we add our blossom. So I'm going to clean off my brush and my water, because I'm going to be switching to the larger brush. And then I'm just going to wipe that in my tissue. And with the large brush, I'm going to dip into the brown. And make sure you're kind of evenly coating your brush in the paint. And we can start to paint in our dock. So I'm going to go from one side to the other using horizontal strokes. So I'm going to switch to a smaller brush to do my poles. So I'm going to dip into the brown, and then you can be nice and precise. It's up to you how neat you want to be with the poles. This could be quite a weathered dock. It doesn't have to be too kind of neat and precise. But it is slightly easier with the smaller paintbrush. So now we're going to mix a slightly lighter brown to add some highlights onto the dock. So I'm going to take some brown and I'm just going to pop it in a space on our palette. And then I'm going to scoop into some white. And then I'm going to add that and mix it together. So I'm going to take slightly more brown because we need quite a lot of paint for this. So make sure you're mixing enough. Okay, so when you're happy with your light brown, I'm just going to take off some of the excess on the edge of the palette, like we did before. And then I'm going to use those same kind of loose horizontal strokes again. So in the dock, I'm just going to go from left to right, left to right. And because the brown is still wet underneath, it will blend really nicely with this light brown that we're adding on top. So again, you might want those kind of nice, thin, delicate lines as we're reaching the top. So I'm just going to take some more of that light brown paint and I'm going to add some highlights to the poles. So I'm just going to do a stroke of highlight on the right hand side of each pole, just to kind of redefine their shape again. And then on your poles on the other side, I'm just going to add the highlight on the left hand side. And then I'm just going to do a little horizontal stroke on the top of each pole. Okay, so now I'm going to wash my brush and my branches should be dry for the blossom. So I've just changed my water and I've washed my brushes and now I'm ready to start painting the cherry blossom flowers. So I'm going to take my small brush and I'm going to dip into a combination of colours. But first of all, I'm just going to replenish my white because it's got slightly murky. So if you have a space on your palette, you might want to just add a blob of fresh white in a nice kind of clean dish. So with my small paintbrush, I'm going to dip into the magenta, but I'm also going to dip straight into the pink as well. So by having a combination of colours on your brush means that when you're adding your cherry blossom flowers, you'll create really lovely tones as all three colours are on your brush. And they'll kind of naturally blend together. So kind of keep dipping into each colour, and I'm just going to add blobs of paint to give the impression of the cherry blossom flowers. So you might want to have kind of bigger blobs and smaller blobs to create the impression that you've got different sized flowers and to make it look slightly more natural so they don't all look the same. But keep dipping into each colour. And I'm just aiming at the bottom of each branch. So that's kind of where my cluster of flowers are going to be. Okay, so when you're happy with your flowers on your branches, I'm just going to add a few falling petals. So I've taken those same colours again on my brush, and I'm going to do little blobs of colour over our painting to kind of give the impression that the petals are falling kind of downwards onto the dock. It's completely up to you how many petals you want falling. You can do loads, you can do just a little bit, however many you want. So I'm just painting in my last couple of fallen petals. And there we have our dock in the sunset. So you're welcome to carry on painting. You can change the colours, you can add anything, whatever you want to do with your paintings, but continue to have fun with it. So I hope you've enjoyed painting Dock in the Sunset with me today, and I hope you got your creative juices flowing and tried something new. Do check out more of our paintings at Prime Pass. There are so many different pictures for you to choose from, so I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.